This is an ABP Live Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Clear Cut, only on ABP Live Podcast. This is your newsman Rudrashish signing in on a lovely Friday morning. But unfortunately, I don't have lovely things to talk about today. Yes, I know it's festive season. We just had Durga Puja. Diwali's just round the corner. But Houston, we have a problem. The share prices of Credit Suisse, which is one of the oldest and one of the most influential banks in the world, has hit rock bottom. Credit Suisse's share price has plummeted drastically, 60% to be exact. And on top of that, Credit Suisse's debt have risen to a 14-year high, which is actually the highest since the global financial crisis of 2008. Now, this has triggered a speculation that a global recession is about to hit us, and it's going to hit us hard, because all signs lead to that. We've also seen the economy of the United States shrinking in the first quarter. The US economy has reported high number of layoffs, and the people applying for unemployment benefits is at a 5-month high. Economists have highlighted that either recession is incoming or we already are in a recession. The main reason being that the global economy didn't find enough room to recover after COVID because of the Russia-Ukraine war. An American firm Ned Davis has confirmed in their analysis that there's a 98% chance that there's going to be a global recession. So who decides if there's a recession? And can a common man sense it coming? Let's decode all of this today. And also, renowned economist Mr. Aakash Jindal joins us on the show today to give us a clear-cut take on this issue. So let's get started. Now, the US dollar plays a crucial role in the global economy and in the international market. And as I speak, the US dollar is currently the strongest it has ever been in the last 2 decades. Now, this is because the US Central Bank has hiked the interest rates. Because in any turbulent economic climate, be it a global pandemic or a war in Eastern Europe, investors flock to purchase dollar. But on the other hand, the UK pound, euro, China's yuan, and Japan's yen, and among many others, have plummeted. The rise in the value of dollar makes it more expensive for other nations to import food and fuel. As a result, the central banks raise their interest rates as well to shake up the value of their own currencies. But who actually decides if there's a recession? Now, the National Bureau of Economic Research, a group of economists whose business cycle dating committee defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months. This particular organization typically studies job trends to identify recession. However, the committee also assesses other factors like quantity of income, employment, inflation-adjusted spending, retail sales, and factory output. Now, can a common man sense a recession incoming? Well, the answer is yes. If a recession is incoming, then people will feel a financial pressure on them, a burden on them. This will technically reduce your purchasing capacity. Because if your income is stagnant and the prices of everything else around you increases, it will create a pressure on you and on your day-to-day activities. For example, according to American retail corporation Walmart, the hike in fuel and food prices have forced the masses in US to cut down on non-compulsory purchases like clothes, electronic gadgets, etc. So basically, consumer spending, which is the driving force of any economy, slowly declines. Now, another clear-cut sign that indicates recession knocking at the doorstep is a steady rise in job losses and a surge in unemployment. So, in a nutshell, turbulent times are ahead of us. And to help us lead through this turbulence, economist Aakash Jindal joins us on the show today to give us some bittersweet answers on how to fight through this recession. So welcome to Clear Cut, Mr. Jindal. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's always a great pleasure for me also to be at such a quality organization and with such quality people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, sir, today we are talking about recession. So, one of the oldest and most influential banks in the world, Credit Suisse's share prices has hit an all-time low. It has fallen 60% to be exact. And on top of that, its debt have spiked 14 times high, the highest since the 2008 financial crisis. Now, this has triggered a speculation that Credit Suisse is about to collapse, which will eventually lead to a situation like the 2008 financial crisis. What do you make out of this?
See, Credit Suisse has been reporting losses. Credit Suisse stock price also is down. And globally also, you see, if you talk about the data given by different countries, I think we are already in recession. Yes, I'm making this statement on your platform that we are already in recession 3 months ago on various different global platforms, including your own distinguished sister organization, ABP News. I made a statement that there could be global recession. We could enter a global recession. But now, I want to state that we are already into global recession. Because see, US, the biggest economy in the world, the biggest, most powerful, and it's being considered a role model economy in the world. They have shown 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. Now that is technically recession. China, the second biggest economy of the world, they have exhibited merely 0.4% GDP growth. Now talk about Germany, which is the 4th biggest economy. It is in trouble because of lack of, or because of reduced gas supply and reduced energy supply from Russia. We already know that Europe is into a huge problem because Russia was a very big supplier of energy. Now Russia was the biggest supplier of crude oil to Europe, and Russia is almost the second supplier of energy to the entire world. If you talk about different energy things like oil, gas, and coal. So already the world is going through a crisis. Now, how we reached here is, I'll tell you. Initially, we all know that we had 2 years of Corona. Now, exactly. 2 years of Corona had a huge impact on global economy. Now, what happened is, what is very interesting to note is that once we started recovering from Corona, if we take the months of February or March, when there was some partial recovery from Corona, that were even worse months for global economy. Why so? Because global economy needed funds, needed liquidity, needed stimulus when it was recovering from Corona. And initially during the Corona time, it were central banks in the world which were pumping in liquidity. But while we started recovering from Corona, February 2022, it was the time Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Now banks couldn't put in liquidity. Rather, now liquidity is being squeezed because of high inflation. See, I'll give you a simple example which would make things clear to all our viewers. Now, if somebody is having a disease, if he is being medicated or he has to be operated because of that disease, once he gets remedied for that disease, then is the time when he needs energy. Similar was the position with the world. When it came out of Corona, that was the time when it needed tonic or energy, that is liquidity. But because of Russia-Ukraine war, liquidity had to be tightened. So liquidity couldn't be injected. So post-Corona woes for the global economy were bigger than Corona woes. Now talk about Russia-Ukraine war. We all know Russia-Ukraine war increased inflation in US and the entire world. Now also the inflation in US is more than 8%. So what happened was the central banks in US and in other parts of the world, they kept on raising rates of interest. Now raising rates of interest means there would be lesser demand. What does lesser demand mean? Lesser demand means lesser production. So if there is lesser demand, lesser production, what does that mean? Initially slowdown and then recession. So I want to make a statement on your platform today that yes, we have the world as a whole has entered a phase of recession. Now already we can see that war doesn't seem to de-escalate. The sort of statements which are coming from Russia, which we saw on global media regarding mobilization and other things. So it clearly tells us that the mood is not to de-escalate the war. So I think perhaps the recession may be even severe And even global organizations are predicting that the GDP growth in calendar year 2023, the one which has to follow, could be as little as only 2.2%.
Okay.
So yes, we are, as a world, as a globe, we have to accept that earlier we were talking about that we may enter recession, but today we are in recession.
So you mean that one of the biggest reason that we are experiencing or are going to experience recession is because of the Russia-Ukraine war?
What I want to say is that initially Corona, then because liquidity couldn't be injected post-Corona, and to top it, we had Russia-Ukraine war.
Exactly.
So we had three serial negativities, one after the another. Initially Corona, which weakened the global economy. Post-Corona, when liquidity had to be injected, we couldn't do that because of Russia-Ukraine war. And then high inflation, lack of energy, very little energy being in Europe. See, now I'll tell you, in Europe, you'll find many publications also, and which are talking that perhaps Germany may go in for some alternative source of energy. So now what happens is, I'll give you an example. Now, if they want more fuel or substitute fuel from some other country, they can use containers or tankers. But what about the energy which they were getting through pipelines from Russia? Now, containers and tankers can be arranged from other countries within a week, but pipelines can't be laid within months or 2 months.
Exactly.
So there's a great deficit of energy which Europe is undergoing. I've been talking to certain friends in Germany. They're telling that initially the house rent used to include the energy bill. Now the landlords are telling, let's talk about energy separately. And that also has to be kept elastic because they are not sure what sort of energy prices are going to be, gas prices.
Okay.
So situation is that desperate in Europe. And the entire world is connected. Now, though our own country, India, we are up to a certain extent insulated from all this, but still we have been impacted. How? Because US, they kept on increasing rates of interest. What happened is, when the rates of interest reached a very high level, dollars started flying out of our country back to US. So what happened? We also were impacted. Dollar went to a level of 81 rupees, 85 paisa. So that impacted us. How? Because what means higher dollar means the crude oil would be costlier for us.
Yes.
We are importing around 75 to 80% of crude oil. Higher dollar means edible oil, eating oil, cooking oil, which is being imported. We are importing around 55% of edible oil. That would be costlier. Then a lot of our children are students. They go abroad for studies. Lot of Indians, they travel abroad, some for business, some for leisure, tourism. That becomes costlier. The only small benefit we get is that yes, some of our Indian brothers, they are staying abroad, working there, and sending remittances sending remittances to their families in India. But that benefit is too small in comparison with the losses. So ultimately, a country like India, which was not directly related, which wouldn't have been directly impacted from this, has also been impacted. So the point which I want to drive home is that since the entire world is connected to each other, directly or indirectly, and the connectivity level or the interdependence of the entire economic world is highest if we see the history. So the entire world has been impacted. That's why we are in a phase of global recession. Now I'll give you an example. Had this Russia-Ukraine war broken 20 years ago or 40 years ago, global damage would have been lesser because global dependence on other countries was much lesser. Now the dependence on other countries, the connectivity with other countries is much, much higher. So since the world is quite integrated, dependent on each other economy, so we are seeing all sorts of negativities in the world and we are in recession. Now the global leaders have to find out ways how to come out of this recession.
Okay. Now, sir, since you mentioned India and how India will be impacted, now I want to ask you, how can a common Indian man prepare for a recession? How should he be gearing up for this turbulent times ahead?
I think a very, very interesting and a very relevant question. But the answer is not going to make many of my Indian brothers happy. because the answer may hurt some of us. See, what happens is we are into a festive season where all of us, including me, you, all our families would like to go out and do shopping. See, we Indians, for us, this period is auspicious. This is the time we go out for buying vehicles, whether it's cars, whether it's bikes, or white goods like an LED or an air conditioner, or at least apparels. But what I'm going to advise my fellow Indians is something which may not go well with everybody. We should concentrate more on the essentials: food, shelter, housing, education, and health. We shouldn't go in for luxurious expenditure. Though festival means that we must go out for shopping, our families would have been waiting for it for the past 3 years. Why so 3 years? Because 2 years had Corona. So maybe youngsters wouldn't be too happy with my statement because they would have been waiting.
People are double excited.
But the reality is we must concentrate on essentials. We must do saving, because cash is something which is going to be very important in case the recession deepens. Cash is going to be the king. So I think, we should
say that save rather than spend this festive season.
The expenditure should be on essentials. Of course, the one has to spend on food, shelter, clothing, education and health. So all the essentials, one must keep on spending. But on other things, which one can do away with, luxuries and comforts, one should stay away. Because the coming months may show us higher level of recession, and then at the time your savings, the cash which you have kept with you. By cash, I don't mean hard cash only. Cash means liquidity. By cash, I mean in broader terms. Like a bank deposit is also cash because it can be inquest. You can prematurely break it within 15 minutes. So what I mean is that savings in a liquid or a liquid-like shape, which you can use, are going to be very important. This is my suggestion and advice for all my Indian brothers and sisters.
Okay. Now, sir, as we all know, recession means financial crunch in every single sector. So, do people like me be worried about our jobs? Our jobs might face some turbulence as well.
I wouldn't like to say that, but the reality is, you have asked again a very pertinent question. Tomorrow, what may happen is, if the recession increases, so the impact would be there on India also. So then what may happen is perhaps there may be lesser sales of things. If there's lesser sales of things, so there may be lesser advertisements for media. And we all know that advertisements play a huge role as far as media is concerned. Subscription also, they do play some role. So if the recession is there could be issues with certain people's jobs. So one has to be ready to fight with that. That's why I said the initial point, cash would be the king. Supposingly, somebody loses a job and for another 15 days, he doesn't get a job. That time the savings, they really would matter. Rather than going in for a luxurious purchase now, if one has liquidity for 2 months, with which he can sustain his family with all the basics, that's relevant. So that's why I'm suggesting everybody, whether it's a businessman or a salaried professional, that save. So because in case the coming months, which I expect could be harsher, that time your savings are going to rescue you. And everybody would be impacted, not only somebody who is working in a private sector organization, everybody, including somebody who is running a business. If somebody is owning a restaurant, there would be lesser footfall. If somebody is selling vehicle, perhaps there would be lesser sale of vehicles when people wouldn't be having that much jobs. So one must concentrate on savings and just keep a watch on how global events unfold. And again, let's hope that global leaders are able to put their head together and they can come out with some solution to this Russia-Ukraine war, because the best solution is that the war ends.
Exactly.
But of course, ordinary people like me and you can't do anything about it. It's only global leaders. As of now, they are also finding it difficult to do anything much about it, but they are the only ones who can try finding out a solution for that.
Exactly. People like us can only comment and speculate.
Yeah. we can only comment, speculate, and wait and watch. That's it.
Exactly, sir. And lastly, sir, since you said we are already in a recession, so when can we see the peak of this recession?
I think the recession may peak out in December or January, because that time winter would escalate in many parts of Europe. And when winter escalates, energy requirements increase. Because almost all homes, they need central heating at that time. So central heating would mean more consumption of energy, so lesser disposable income. And then economy is a cycle. If a country has seen 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, then the corporates, they are not in a much mood to expand. They don't take much orders. So the cascading impact, it increases generally in the 3rd quarter. So what I expect is that in the coming 2 to 3 months, the recession may be much more severe if there is no solution to Russia-Ukraine war. And if we get a solution, then the recession could be diluted. Of course, the recession wouldn't go away within a week or 10 days, even if the war ends. But at least there would be light at the end of tunnel. So which would mean that companies can replan their expansion plans. People can also plan for buying things. So basically, I think the period of December and the months around it would be a very tough period.
And sir, do you think this recession will be as high as the 2008 financial crisis?
No, I don't think it can be as severe, because 2008, number one, it hit us suddenly. Here we have seen Corona for 2 years. We have seen Russia-Ukraine wars. So economies, companies, individuals, they have got time to adjust to the situation. So in 2008, things were too fast. And the subprime crisis, it had a much bigger horizon than this crisis. So I think, and the world is wiser also after 2008 crisis. So world has also developed shock absorber for it. So I think it would be lesser than the 2008 crisis. But of course, I think Russia-Ukraine war also needs to de-escalate. That is also very important.
So you make it clear that the de-escalation of the Russia-Ukraine war is a big thing for this recession to neutralize.
I'll add even one more big. You have said big. I would say big thing. Yes, I totally endorse what you're saying. If tomorrow, hypothetically, Russia-Ukraine war ends, then psychological recession would start ending. And again, companies would start having their expansion plans. Of course, recession wouldn't disappear, but the mood of the people, mood of the corporates, mood of the economies would change. So basically, it all depends on Russia-Ukraine war and how the world tackles the energy deficiency thing, because energy is very much required, whether for any car to move or for the global economy to move.
Exactly. So we end today's interview on a very alarming note that we are in a recession, in a financial crisis, and bad times are ahead of us. But if we stick around, if we manage things wisely, we can get through it.
Yeah, definitely. That's the only way, that we have to reduce expenditure. We have to invest on essentials, and we have to have much higher reserves than we have in normal times to sustain us through the crisis.
Exactly, sir. Well, sir, thank you so much for your precious time. It's always a pleasure.
Wonderful. I loved your questions. 2 of your questions, particularly the second last and the last one, were very relevant questions. I love these nice questions because these are very much connected to the common man.
Exactly, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Bye, sir.
So that's all the news and scoops I have for you today. This episode was produced by Lalit. This is your newsman Rudrashish Kanjilal signing off. Have a wonderful weekend and keep listening to ABP Live Podcasts.
This is an ABP Live Podcast.